Today we're taking a look at the Electrocompaniet ECI6DX Mark II, and I would have not remembered that. That's a mouthful. It's written right under the power button. And talking about the power button, very satisfying to click. Now it does take some time to warm up the unit and start, so I'll get that going. While I talk about the Electrocompaniet as a company, the company itself has been around since 1973. However, they're not really well known in the North American market, but don't worry, they are coming back. Now, the ECI6DX Mark II is a all-in-one player, meaning they have an amplifier, a preamplifier, a DAC, and a streamer built in. So all you really need is a set of speakers and speaker cables to stream music. And of course, you can add CD players and vinyl and stuff like that. Later in the back section, we'll talk about that. But of course, Electrocompaniet, being a high-end company, is not only going for convenience of everything being in one package, but also making sure that it sounds as good as they have intended. Now, talking about the price tag of this unit, it is standing at $7,500, which is about the direct competition as you can get to a Hegel H390, which is also an all-in-one player that I have highly praised over the years. Another competition will be something like the naim units, that is a all-in-one player, as well as some Cambridge audio units for comparison. So while just a few years ago, competition in this all-in-one player category at this price range was scarce, now we're seeing much more better options and definitely more competition at this price point, as well as even lower and higher price points with all-in-one music players like this. In terms of the aesthetics, the look of this unit, it looks interesting, it looks sophisticated, and it definitely has its quirks. Firstly, it has an acrylic front panel, and you can quote me on this. It's the first time I've seen an acrylic front panel on a high-end amplifier like this. It is an interesting look and definitely comes down to taste, but personally for me, it's really not clicking. You may feel different and your mileage may vary depending on what your taste is in equipment and how they look. I am a fan of these golden knobs though, or buttons I should say. They do feel very solid when I press it, and it does feel very premium and luxurious. Now, once you turn on the unit, the first thing that you'll see is in big bold letters, media, M-E-D-I-A. Now, I would have loved to seen streaming instead of media, but this means streaming, and we'll talk about why it's media instead of streaming very soon. But here are the start to the many quirks of this unit that is actually quite fun to talk about. Now, when you're in media, now this means that you can stream, and of course you have to connect the unit via Ethernet or Wi-Fi, just like any streamers or all-in-one players for streaming. And once you connect it to your network, either via Wi-Fi or Ethernet, now you can do AirPlay, DLNA for Android users out there, or do Tidal Connect, Spotify Connect, Qobuz, and so on. No Amazon Music support as far as I know. And that's about it. It does have an app that's pretty intuitive. UI is pretty excellent. It's called the EC Play. And now we will switch to different inputs. You see Toslink 1 here and Toslink 2. Anything weird that you see here? Yes, we are missing an I on Toslink. And this is not misspelled, while it is, but it's done on purpose because the screen can only fit so many letters. So hence, media instead of streaming, because streaming is a longer word than media. Interesting. Now the quirk doesn't end there. Now if I cycle through all the different inputs, notice how I cannot go back to streaming. There is no media. So there's two ways to actually three ways to go back to streaming. One is just simply by connecting your AirPlay or play the music through streaming, and it'll automatically play and stream no matter what input you are in. Interesting. Now the second way is to actually turn off and then turn back the unit, and then it will automatically go back to the media display. Now the third option I have found to go back to media is on the remote, and the most easiest way to go back to media. However, this is not listed anywhere on the manual or anything like that, so I take pride in this finding. So you take the remote and press the stop and eject button, and it will go back to media, just like that. Interesting. Now, stop and eject is for CD players, but in this case, it means that now you're back in media. The quirk does not end there. So yes, you get volume control on this unit, volume up or down, either via these beautiful buttons, or you have the volume up and down on the remote. Now, interesting enough, as you can see here, there is a little halo ring that indicates where you are in the volume setup. And it is quite interesting, isn't it? It's like a halo effect, and it's going around this logo, Electrocompaniet's logo, and it's quite interesting. I have never seen a volume control like this. Now, there's a con to this, of course, and that is that it is sometimes hard to see if you are sitting very far away, but from my sitting position, it was really not a concern. Second thing is that, well, depending on the angle you're sitting, or perhaps if you're putting this in a rack, then you may not know exactly what volume you're at. But otherwise, I do like this specific quirk because it is different and very interesting. It's just like a ring. I can do this all day. It just goes around. Now, this unit is pretty powerful, outputting 125 watts into 8 ohms, and it is set to be stable down to 2 ohms, so it should be no problem driving difficult to drive loudspeakers out there. And I did test out with some difficult to drive loudspeakers like the KEF LS50 Metas, or speakers that like a little bit more power like the Bucard S400 Mark II. And from my experience of testing this unit, I would say it has absolutely no problem driving difficult to drive loudspeakers or power demanding loudspeakers out there. You can really grab those bass and really control it. And in that way, it is very similar to the Hegel units in terms of that bass control and grip. And just like the Hegel units or many of the all-in-one players these days, it has plenty of inputs and outputs on the back, starting with the analog inputs as well as outputs for preamplifiers, or you can even connect it to a subwoofer. It also has digital inputs labeled Toslink properly. How funny would it be if they actually misspelled it just like the front on the back? Now that would be very quirky and very interesting. Now, anyways, the speaker binding post on this unit is quite interesting and quirky as well. And what I mean by that is that when you are using banana cables, it's not an issue. But when you use spade cables, which is inserted in only a specific direction because it has a plastic cover all around the binding post, the way the angle is set, if you have a little bit thick power cables, then now you start to have a little bit of a space problem with the power cable and the speaker cable fighting for room. And of course, this is not a big problem if you're using banana cables, but if you are using spades or any cable that you're planning to insert into that little slot on the binding post, then it does become a problem at times depending on the thickness of the cable you're using. So something to be aware of. Other than that, the chassis is a pretty sturdy design, nice chassis. It has nice vents at the top here. And another thing that is something that many people will miss, but I appreciate it, is the curvature of the top panel that is in line with the curvature of the front acrylic panel here, which is a nice touch. It would have been kind of weird if the box was a little bit more cut, right, straight on. But here you see a nice curve, making it look a little bit more homogeneous with the rest of the design. So overall, kudos to the design. The remote could be a little bit better, but it's light and it is plastic. So anyhow, moving on. That's pretty standard for a lot of remotes these days, unfortunately. And in terms of sound, now I have paired this speaker up with many different types of speakers. And depending on the speaker, it can break or make the experience with the Electrocompaniet. For example, if you have a more warmer character speakers like the Audio Craftsman, for example, that I reviewed, or perhaps even something like the Bucard S400 Mark II, or the Q Acoustic Concept 300 or the Concept 50 for that matter, as well as some of the Dynaudio speakers like the Dynaudio Heritage series, right, the Heritage speakers, or the Evoke series, Evoke 10s or 20s, or even the speaker that I just reviewed, the Revival Audio Atlanti 5s. Those are all speakers that I find to be a little bit on the warmer side, a smooth and a little bit more warmer, inviting kind of sound. And with those kind of speakers, the Electrocompaniet will sound pretty good, but it wouldn't be my first choice to go to, since the Electrocompaniet itself has a pretty warm, smooth tone to the overall sound. In fact, the Electrocompaniet I find to be the best match with speakers like the Focal Theta speakers that I have just in for review, but I have not reviewed it yet, so I will keep that a little bit of a secret. But as you can imagine, most Focal speakers do have a little bit more energy up top, and that's when the Electrocompaniet really takes control and makes everything more smooth, more refined, and that is the beauty of the Electrocompaniet that I have found. As well as, for example, the beautiful, absolutely gorgeous Borussen X2 speakers that I have in right now that I have yet to review again. So that's coming up fairly soon. So we'll keep an eye out for that. But excellent speakers and a very good match with the Electrocompaniet. Again, it smooths out those rough edges and really makes the speakers sing, but in a more smooth and refined way if you're in for that. Now, yes, with the X2, it does take away a little bit of that revealing nature and a little bit of that, kind of more bombastic punch in the mid bass. That's a little bit taken away, but not by much. And definitely if you're in more favor of a smoother experience, a more refined sound that you can listen for longer periods of time, the Electrocompaniet is an excellent match. Another example is the 4-lane, which is a single driver design, very efficient, very easy to drive, and paired up with something like the Electrocompaniet, you have plenty of power, and the synergy there is quite good. I would say it's probably the best match I've found with the 4-lane so far. And I would say that the Electrocompaniet really smoothed out those rough edges, again, make it more refined, and that's where the beauty lies in the mid-range and high frequency. Now, again, you can see how these are all speakers that is a little bit more energetic and has that excitement. Another speaker that comes to mind in the budget category is perhaps Klipsch loudspeakers. Some people like that forward Klipsch sound, some people don't, they can't tolerate it. And while the Electrocompaniet is not going to completely make the Klipsch speakers sound like, Bocard Audio or Dynaudio, for example, but it's going to make it so that it's going to sound a little bit less forward and a little bit more refined and smoother of an experience, similar to if you add a very good tube amplifier, for example. And in that regard, the Electrocompaniet is an excellent choice with even Klipsch speakers, in my opinion. And you can kind of see where this is going. With speakers that is a little bit more forward sounding are the speakers that is the best match with the Electrocompaniet, in my opinion, making the mid-range and high frequency a little bit more smoother for a little bit more smoother and refined experience in the mid-range and high frequency. And that's where I think the Electrocompaniet really shines. Now the bass I have no problem with. The bass on the Electrocompaniet is very nice. It is very grippy. I have no complaints with the bass whatsoever. It extends low. It is pretty dynamic. It is not the most punchiest sounding mid bass, but that is pretty standard, and in comparison to Hegel or other units out there, I would say it's on par in terms of that mid bass dynamic as well as that extension in the low sub bass region. Now I do have to mention that with some speakers it is an exceptional match. So yes, the speakers that I have mentioned so far are good matches, I would say, even above average, but with some speakers, just like how Hegel is an excellent match with Kef or Magnapen speakers, the Electrocompaniet I found is an excellent match with Triangle or the 4-lane speakers. Triangle, for example, I have experienced the Electrocompaniet paired up with Triangle speakers at shows many times, and I have always found that the sound was very homogeneous and very good, and better than how I experienced those same Triangle speakers in my room with different gear. So in that regard, I do find that Triangle speakers are generally a very good match with Electrocompaniet speakers, providing an exceptional match there. Another speaker is the 4-lane speaker that I have been enjoying for some time now. And again, a single driver design does not need too much power because it's sensitive. But with the Electrocompaniet, it provides a tremendous amount of headroom, bass control, especially for a single driver, insane amount of bass control, as well as that mid-range and high frequency being really well controlled and smooth and refined. So definitely a good match with certain speakers, and definitely not so good with some speakers I have tried. In terms of sound staging, I would say the sound staging is quite good especially for an all-in-one unit like this. Now, while it may not rival tube amplifiers or amplifiers that's really known for sound staging, no. However, the sound staging is quite deep and quite wide and very adequate. It's not too much of an intimate experience, I would say. Or to give you a better idea, a real type of sound staging, which is a phrase that I started to pick up these days. And what I mean by real sound staging is more real to life. So for example, tube amplifiers that I enjoy and things that I enjoy in my system are things that are unrealistically wide in soundstage and 3D like. So it's coming from everywhere, like you have a surround channel and have really nice depth in soundstage, like it's far away from you and all that kind of stuff. But that's not what the Electrocompaniet does. The Electrocompaniet actually provides a sound staging that you would kind of get if you were in a venue or if you were at a concert, for example. So it's pretty normal and spacious, but not stretched out infinitely or holographic surround sound going on. So it's a pretty adequate sound staging, something that is similar to the Hegel H390, for example. I would say that in comparison to the Hegel H390, which is at a very similar price point, the bass on the Hegel is a little bit more emphasized, a little bit more mid-bass bump, and a little bit more control in the bass in comparison, but both are very, very similar in that regard with bass control, to where I'm really nitpicking and making the slightest differences here. And depending on the speakers, there will be a totally different, situation. So definitely something that you have to consider is the speaker pairing with Hegel as well as the Electrocompaniet before deciding which one is better. I would say neither is really better in this case, especially because they pair up with different speakers better than their counterparts, or competition, I should say. And to that, I will make another small comparison. The Hegel H390, I would say, has a little bit of a smaller soundstage than the Electrocompaniet, but again, a smidge difference and nothing to really break or make the difference or the purchase differences. I would say I wouldn't make a purchase decision based on those two differences, the bass and soundstage, as they are very, very similar, and it will really come down to the speaker matching that matters more. The main difference between Hegel and Electrocompaniet in terms of sound signature that I have found is in the mid-range and high frequency. The Electrocompaniet, in my opinion, is a lot more smoother in the mid-range as well as the high frequency in comparison to Hegel units. So in that regard, you can see how the Electrocompaniet will be a better match with more forward sounding, a little bit more energetic sounding loudspeakers out there, while Hegel H390 may be a better match with, as we know, magnet pan speakers, KEF speakers, maybe even Bocard speakers, maybe, or even Dynaudio speakers and so on that many people enjoy. However, again, it really comes down to the different pairings of speakers and different choice in speakers that will ultimately decide which one of these, the Electrocompaniet or Hegel units, you would most likely like better when you pair them up together. So hopefully that kind of helps you answer some of the questions you may have. Personally, for me, I do like the fact that Electrocompaniet provides that smoothness in the mid-range that is not rolling off the top frequency totally, but instead is making it more refined and smoother of an experience. And while that is a double-edged sword, especially when it comes to smoother sounding loudspeakers that's already smooth enough, I feel like with some loudspeakers that do have that excitement on the top range, again, I feel like in those situations, it does come very clutch, and the Electrocompaniet really does make those speakers sound better and more refined and smooth without taking out detail in the mix. So that's pretty much it from me. I hope this video was helpful, entertaining, and informative. And if it was, make sure to click that like button and subscribe because it does help my channel out tremendously. So thank you in advance, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Until next time.